So welcome everybody, anybody who's watching this. We just graduated in October from the Flatiron Boot Camp, and we've been going around the networking circuit, but with everything that's happening with coronavirus and everything shutting people in their houses, we figured we'd try something
hmm
different.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just decided to record a video and see what happens with it. So yeah, well,
Cool.
let me introduce Thomas. This is Thomas,
Hello, everyone.
and I'm Alexander or Alex. I tried to do Alexander as like my professional name, but it never
Yeah, it's fine. I
never really
remember.
took
I remember
off.
you introducing to yourself as Alexander. Yeah.
Yeah, I just ended up always having a glottal stop in the middle of my name, and it was just like, oh, Alex Ander. So yeah, so I
As,
just go by Alex.
as someone with a background in linguistics, I appreciate the glottal stop reference. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, thank you. But yeah, Thomas, do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna introduce myself. I'm gonna probably talk. I'm gonna talk about a little bit like my background. Uh, would you want me to kind of cover all the questions we talked about earlier, or you want to parse it out for later?
Well, just start out with like your elevator pitch. Like if you
Sure.
were to introduce yourself to somebody and, just like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, something like that. Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah.
Go.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Thomas. I'm a UX designer. I graduated from the same cohort as Alex, and what I'm trying to look for in for UX work, I'm interested in product design, and down the line, I'm interested in becoming a product designer.
Mhm.
But yeah, my background, as I said a little bit earlier, but before I became a UX designer, I was actually a English teacher in Madrid, Spain. My background is in Spanish language acquisition, and also writing intensive English. I got 2 degrees from Marquette in Milwaukee, so
Nice.
Midwest boy for life. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew somebody that went to Marquette. They graduated with a triple major, which I didn't even think
Oh
was
my
possible.
goodness.
But
it
um,
was it was it was hard to juggle both of them for me. So I just can't imagine getting three. That just sounds
yeah,
like a long time. Wow. Props.
yeah.
Uh-huh. But
So
yeah.
how long did you spend in Spain?
In Spain, I was there for the academic school year of 2016 and 2017. I graduated in May of 2016, and then that summer, that fall school year in 2016, excuse me, that's where I went. That's where I went to Madrid to do classwork. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And what was your experience over there as far as, teaching? Was it difficult? Was it a adjustment for you to go over
Yeah,
there?
I'll take a little back that the government of Spain has a program for any native English speaker who has a college degree to go on as their English as to be hired as an English language auxiliary. So what they do is we get placed in schools throughout Spain. It's not necessarily you're placed in Madrid. You be placed in like Mallorca or the north, the south, and very different, very varied places geographically as well in Spain. And yeah, so you are part of kind of like the dynamic between the teacher, then you be their assistant, and what they have you there to do is kind of work one-on-one, speaking English with these students, kind of being an additional resource for these teachers to use separate activities. So, for example, I worked at a kind of a high school for Spain. High school is more like junior high plus high school of what Americans know in their educational system. So I was working with a varied like levels of students in terms of speaking skills and age. And yeah, so a lot of what I did would I would take half the classroom and bring them to another room, and then I would have speaking like activities with them varied across certain subjects. For example, I was a part of a history class, an English class, and there, and which was the third one? No, it wasn't. Excuse me, it was another English class. But there was. It wasn't just English lessons. It would be this whole entire school, with many schools in Spain happen to have, is that they're all English taught for their lessons.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah,
Probably smart for.
yeah, no, it was really interesting, and it was really impressive to run into like students who were probably like in eighth grade, junior high level, being like 12 or 13, who were able to communicate to me as easily as we're communicating to each other right now. Granted, there would usually be some mistakes here and there, but it was very fluent how some of these kids could speak, and it was very impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Mm.
if only the American culture can have that same sort of like bilingualism.
Yeah, it'd be. I think that'd be a great resource to have. But yeah, no, I understand that it's what was I going to say here? I understand like kind of reason for it, because English is like the language used in the businesses, in the workplace and all. But
Yeah,
yeah, I would still love to have that resources be more widespread in America, because uh, I'm a big fan of like learning other foreign languages. For example, um, I also picked up learning Portuguese. I have a couple friends who I only speak Brazilian Portuguese with. Um,
oh,
so
nice.
that whole it's just for me, because kind of tying this in with UX, kind of your how am I going to put this, is that what is it? Excuse me, I need a kind of way to put my thoughts together. But basically, UX kind of, I mean, excuse me, learning another language opens kind of another whole perspective for you in terms of
Yeah,
how a whole culture speaks, perceives things, references things. And it was a great journey to like pick that up while I was living in Spain.
yeah. Well, I've heard that learning another language actually changes the way that you think. Like when you think in another language, it the ways that you think about things and the ways that you like the parts of your personality that are expressed are different.
Hmm.
So I'd be really interested to see how that ties into like as you're designing things, like being able to have this sort of secondary processing circuit that is this
Yeah,
language.
yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
speaking of UX design, do you want to walk us through a little bit how you got from, teaching English in Spain to going to study at the boot camp?
Yeah, so like that jump happened when a little bit back before I started working in Spain. Before that, I graduated college with the intent of going back after Spain to get my master's in something called computational linguistics, which
Ooh,
was a
nice.
blend between kind of creating algorithms and software that would integrate the human voice, understand the semantics behind what's saying, and then process a meaningful result from that.
Yeah.
I was very interested in that. I applied to a couple places, but it's from what my research was, it's such a new field that there wasn't many colleges that offered it, even computational linguistics. So
Hmm.
there's roughly like 3 or 4 universities I applied to. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because my background then in coding wasn't as knowledgeable as it is now. Uh,
Hmm.
Definitely, I learned a little bit along the way, from here to then. So that didn't work out, but ever since I was very little, I was always very drawn to creativity. Before I went to, primarily, I wanted to go to college for graphic design, but that changed when I got into my freshman year. Um, so I always had like this creative mentality towards things, and it's something I always was interested in. So like when I was doing research on like what my next step would be, in a way, I was incorporating something I grew up always being attracted to, and I this through talking through like a contact of mine, she showed me this world of UX design. She worked as a UX designer at Lucy, which is one of the products that they make is exhibits for museums, and of course UX is incorporated into that mentality thinking. It was really cool to see her see the studio, and to see what they were working on. So it was UX. It was like a non-digital form of UX, which is really interesting to see.
Yeah,
And
that
from
is
there,
interesting.
it's very eye-opening to show that this was an industry. And so I did further research, and I decided I wanted to go forward with it. And then I found through more research online, hearing testimonials, I decided to go forward with going to designation. And that was a little
Interesting.
bit of the reason why I focused my sights on UX. Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of went backdoor, like through the back door of like experience design into user experience design, and learning through the boot camp.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to be introduced to UX because the difference between analog and digital, for me, they didn't really seem that too far apart from what I was seeing with like Lucy and all.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
yeah.
feel the same way. Like definitely, I always, put myself across as an experience designer, not like
Mhm.
user experience, customer experience, employee experience, because
Yeah.
experience design sort of, it's experience design. No matter who is experiencing it, the same sort of principles apply, and there might be specificities to like each
Mhm.
individual thing, but that same design thinking mentality, it works for any sort of experience design.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, because what I picked up, what I learned from designation was that yes, this is because we learned about the design process, and that can be applied towards many different types of material, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
It's just
it seems like it seems flexible, in terms of what it can be used towards. Yeah.
yeah. Well, so that brings me to my next sort of question.
Mhm.
After having gone through the process, what is your favorite part of UX design, experience design? Like, as you were going through the boot camp, was there anything that stood out to you as something that you were particularly interested in, or something afterwards?
Yeah, so one part that I really liked about the UX design process is the leap between the first step of gathering all this data, hearing, interviewing users, prospective users, many different types of people, and getting data from domain research and competitive analysis. Just getting that, and the bridge between that and creating concepts for it. I'm really interested in that phase. For example, like
Mhm.
365's rapid iteration. I think and I really like it because it asks me about because it asks me to kind of focus on how I perceive the data that's in front of me. And of course, I'm objective and uh, as objective as I can be, and it's really all on me to see how I translate that data into concepts or things like that. And
Mhm.
I think it's a really crucial part
Yeah.
to make that jump. And since it's crucial, and that's actually like the first artifact you make from this data,
Mhm.
it's really interesting to me, and it's really interesting, and also how we take these divergent concepts and build them into, uh, and kind of working them together into kind of a diverged concept. Basically, that step is what's really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely really appreciate that, like grounding designs in research and making
Mhm.
that jump from, okay, you've gathered all this data, you've, qualitative, quantitative data, whatever it is, and you've like extracted these insights. And so you kind of know the different parts, the different parts that your design will be using, but you
Mhm.
don't exactly know like how you're going to be putting them together, and then being able to jump into that, just the rapid iteration of like, what about this, 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 what about this,
Yeah.
and just letting it all kind of go out. And then then kind of going back to research and being like, okay, well, here are some concepts, like tell us what you think about these, and
Yeah.
going back to the user.
I think one of my favorite parts about like the concepting phase is that it's very agnostic to the end result. One thing I have to always, because it's not a common thing throughout my everyday life to think about, to just create something about an end goal, for me at least.
Yeah.
And for concepting, you kind of have to shake that natural disposition for you, at least from my perspective. And it's just creating without the end goal in mind, but also with the data you have in front of you. I'm always surprised what I come up with and what can be done uh, for a potential solution to this problem. Because for me, getting the data from the domain research and doing all that, you're shining a light on on how the company or how this problem is, but only that's not, but that's separate from actually creating a concept that can help solve for that.
Yeah.
But like the act of identifying, but also like that, it's the difference between the act of like identifying the problem and solving towards it.
Yeah.
Solving it.
And you not wanting to narrow down onto one solution too fast, you know, like
Yeah,
definitely like wanting to hold the space of the problem and just, you know, explore that space and find, you know, what different options you have available to you inside of that before
mhm,
you narrow it down into one.
exactly. Yeah, no, and it definitely, as I said before, you'd be surprised what you could come up with if you approach it like not thinking about the end goal in mind. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, the you know, other thing that I wanted to ask, you know, you said that you wanted to eventually go into product design.
Hmm.
Um, why, you know, what draws you to product design, and you know, what made you make that choice?
Yeah. So I said product design because from what I know that consists of product design is that it's the entire design process from the beginning to the very end, basically. And I'm very interested in like I earlier I said that I like the concepting part of the design process, but I actually am very interested in seeing being a part of the entire process from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be a part of. I'm interested in being a part of every single step. So like researching the concepting, the diverging those concepts, prototyping, testing. Uh, I'm interested in all of it, so I'd like to be a part of it. But lately, I have been updating my skills on, for example, doing UI and visuals as well. And I'm leading towards perhaps like a role between a UI UX designer and a product designer as well.
Mm-hmm.
All those areas are very interesting to me because I want to improve my my UI skills and just uh, learning more about my visual vocabulary and everything like that I can improve. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It can be really hard with the, you know, the UI side, the graphic design side, because, you know, I mean, to be honest, with the UX design, most of the tools that you need are available at your library. You know, it's knowing about books, you know, like reading books about psychology, behavioral design, you know,
Yeah.
all those sorts of things. Like, you don't need as many tools to actually do it unless you're doing like wireframing or something like that. And even then, you know, there's a lot of tools available for you to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Whereas with graphic design and, you know, interface design, animations, those are all, you know,
Those can get pretty technical for sure.
well, and the price point, you know, the price point on a lot of
Right.
those can be pretty high. So
That's an unfortunate part. For example, I've been seeing a lot of job posts out there that are asking for knowledge of the complete Adobe suite,
yeah,
and that's a handful of software that, of course, there's overlap on each one of how you can understand how they can make them how you can make them work for you, but
yeah,
they are a wide range. But for example, I've been learning a little bit more about InDesign, and I've been doing some volunteer work to kind of improve my skill on that end, and it's all very different. It's different enough from Photoshop and also as from Illustrator as well. So yeah, it's just it's all about kind of putting the time in to understand them, and but slowly I'm putting in time to get to be more comfortable using them, and yeah.
interesting. So
Mhm.
you said you've been doing some volunteering. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
As
so
not knowing what you do.
exactly. So a little bit about volunteering. For when I spoke about InDesign, I had I had actually a family member reach out to me to update her portfolio. I mean, excuse me, her brochure for her independent business that she runs. And when she approached me for that, it gave me a chance to get more informed with InDesign, how to edit things, how to kind of alter existing documents to make them to how she wanted them to look as
Mhm.
well. That's what I did for volunteer work on for my InDesign. And also, I volunteer at a IT co-op called Chai Commons that I know that you're part of as well, coincidentally. And yeah, one of the things I could speak to that I did for them is create an animated icons for the website, so that when a cursor is hovering over the four icons of like home, about, city map, and documents, that they would come to life and have like an animation to them if you hovered over them.
Yeah, that I remember really liking those animations.
Yeah,
So
they're really fun to make.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And are they hosted online anywhere? Are they on your portfolio or?
As of right now, I'm deciding how to actually place them on my portfolio because I want to show that definitely. But it's not there right now. I'm still thinking about how to put that in.
Well,
Yeah.
you can always put them on Dribble
Right. Oh yeah, I could do that as well.
or Dribbable because there's three B's
For some reason.
for some reason.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting us know all about
Yeah.
you,
No worries.
Thomas. Do you have any questions for me? Anything in specific
Yeah. No,
that
I
you
would like
want
to
to
hear a
know?
little bit about, if you can tell to the audience, just a little bit about you. Yeah, let's hear your background and the initial steps to coming to UX design.
Well, I have a very weird story.
A weird story.
Just about me again, like I said, like
Mhm.
I consider myself an experienced designer, agnostic of where that experience is, whether
Mhm.
it's product, user, customer, employee, anything. I've it's something that I've been interested in a really long time. I also have graphic skills,
Mhm.
and I always describe myself as a stem cell, where I like to go into organizations, find out like where the weaknesses are, what they need, and then adapt to those sorts of those skills.
Awesome.
Because I have a really wide skill set, so most of what I can do, is applicable somewhere. I do writing, I do strategy, I do experience design, I do all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah, no, strategy is something I don't really. I'm less informed about. So I'd love to maybe, perchance, even another topic for for this podcast is to hear a little more about that strategy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you talked a little bit about it. I tend to be a systems thinker and
Mhm.
operate at many different levels at the same time. So strategy really appeals to me because it kind of has that system thinking capability to it, where you can, whether it's social media strategy, marketing strategy,
Mhm.
product strategy, just being able to look at how things kind of interrelate with each other in not necessarily obvious ways and be able to get everything working towards a common goal. I find
Yeah.
that really, really interesting and exciting.
Mhm.
But yeah, my background coming into UX design is just really kind of weird. Like you said, also, from a young age, I was really interested in design, engineering. I was the kid that played with Legos all the time.
Same here.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I just loved building things, like whatever it was. I just loved to build things and to make things.
Mhm.
But you
Like
know,
that act of creating is interesting, right?
yeah, the act of
Yeah.
creating was just interesting. But due to kind of my background in high school, I was one of those gifted kids that just constantly felt, dragged down by the stuff that was happening in school. I just really wasn't,
Unchallenged, basically.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
really wasn't engaging me. And, to be honest, I wasn't going out and seeking something to engage in. I just kind of like disconnected through that whole process because,
Hmm.
it's high school's a nightmare for some people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and later on, I sort of discovered. I ended up going to community college, and I sort of discovered this love of learning again. I got into the honors program, and I ended up being on student government. They put me on the board of trustees, and the board of trustees sent me away to these conferences to represent the college, and
Oh
I
wow.
learned a ton about community colleges and their position in the educational ecosystem. So boot camps in specific are really interesting to me because it is again this like non-traditional route of education that theoretically could be really useful to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, I've always had a background in retail, so I just kind of default to that a lot of times. And I worked for a long time. I worked at a children's toy store, was the place right before, my big job.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some stuff happened, some money went missing, and because I was the last employee to be hired, I was the new person, so all eyes fell on me. So they just made it really awkward for me for a while, and I just had to get out of there. And I looked for the first place to go, and I found a strip club of all places. So I started working at a strip club as a bouncer, and it turned out I was good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have always been a natural actor. I see it a lot as being kind of like a concierge in a lot of ways, but a physically imposing one.
Yeah, because you have to fit into that archetype, like that performance. Yeah, I
Yes,
understand that.
there's a lot of performativity at the strip club. Not just with the girl.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. You
Yeah,
gotcha.
but
Mm-hmm.
eventually, I started, trying to branch out into different aspects there. They ran a Halloween show that was just a train wreck the first couple times I watched it.
Oh,
And
man.
eventually I literally like grabbed somebody and I'm like, you were going to let me run this, so it actually runs. And, from that point on,
That actually makes sense where you just like tying back into the strategy.
yeah.
That's something that you were interested in doing in terms of UX. I can definitely see how that background can prepare, like has prepared you for this strategy
Oh yeah,
or strategy
absolutely.
role. I mean, yeah.
Like the logistical stuff that you had to manage with being a stage manager, also compared with the performative element of like, this is an experience that people are having,
Mm-hmm.
but unless it was crafted in the proper way and run in the proper way, it wouldn't, they wouldn't get across what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. I was a DJ for a little while at the club as well, which I had to overcome some like pretty strong stage fright, and just being the center of attention would just terrifies me in a lot of ways, or it did back then.
Yeah, it's a skill that's not natural for a lot of people, for sure.
Very not
I
natural.
would say for
Exactly.
majority, honest, it's a skill, yeah, you pick up along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I refined my mic voice, and I started to just get better at the process of it, and I ended up
Mm-hmm.
being one of the better DJs there. And then eventually, they promoted me to management, which wasn't really a promotion that I wanted. I wanted to go into
Yeah.
the marketing side and social media strategy, all that kind of stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm interested in the strategy aspect of it, but I have a talent for operations. So,
Mm.
I was one of the most trusted people there, so they put me there.
That's
And
good. I
I
understand
was,
the distinction too between the operations and the marketing. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And so I was there for a little over a year, and then I was trying to bring in new management techniques, and I was revolutionizing and redesigning a lot of their systems to be more efficient and optimizing them, and fixing old databases, old paperwork, all that kind of just basically doing an overhaul of like their entire system as much
Mhm.
as I could, which had been something that bothered me for a really long time. Is just seeing the way that this stuff wasn't working, but nobody just wanted to fix it. Nobody either knew how or wanted to fix it.
And I could totally see how, from your perspective, like it could be painfully obvious. But there's
Oh yeah,
some people who probably had like more authority didn't see it that way.
yeah.
Yeah.
All they saw was just the time and effort it would take to fix it, and they didn't think it was as much of a problem because they didn't have to work with it. But the people that worked with it, they didn't think that they could change it, so they just dealt with the frustration and the error rates and everything, and it was a whole thing. But
Mhm.
once I got into power, I took it upon myself to take the initiative and be like, okay, well, we're going to change all this stuff because it doesn't work. Nobody's
Yeah.
talking to you, Google. But yeah, so after a while, there was kind of some tension between me and the higher management ownership, and they didn't really want to change how they managed the club. They just wanted to stick with the old, more militaristic, top-down way, and
The one
so
where
they let
no
me go.
questions were probably asked. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or fewer questions were asked about
yeah,
stuff like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So they let me go, and it was fine because I was actually already kind of looking around at
Hmm.
what my next steps could be, looking at possible training, because I definitely didn't want to go to working another club, strip club or otherwise. I just didn't want to be in the industry anymore.
Yeah, I
Um,
understand that.
yeah.
And when was, can you tell us about when you first heard the word UX, basically?
Oh yeah, that was after they let me go. I
Hmm.
was looking around at sort of what was available to me, and originally I wanted to do a coding boot camp because I wanted something. Most of my skills at that point were soft skills.
Hmm.
Like I said, strategy, management, all these sorts of things. But it was all loosey goosey as far as like being able to prove it, aside from just your experience. So I wanted something that was like a discrete, tangible skill. So I started looking into coding boot camps, and I was right about to pull the trigger on going to learning, Java, HTML, CSS, whatever. Um,
Was it going to be
and
was it going to be in Chicago?
yeah, I was going to be in
Oh, yeah.
Chicago. Like
Yeah, 'cause
I
that's
didn't
where,
really have the ability to move anywhere at
yeah.
that point. I just wanted to be able to like just retrain.
Hmm.
And I ended up finding an infographic that described the difference between like coding and UX design. And if you like these sorts of problems and want this sort of job, then you should go with coding. If you want this kind of job and have these kind of skills, go with UX design.
Hmm.
And coding had a lot of the same creative problem solving and
Oh, I
project
definitely
management
agree with
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then with the UX design, there was a lot more social interaction. There was a lot more psychology involved. There was a lot more behavioral design involved, and that to me seemed a lot better paired with my sort of strategic intellect.
Yeah, with the experience that you have already, it does seem that UX would be the next fit if of those two options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just jumped into, and I took a real big leap. It was the biggest sort of risk I've taken in a long time.
Uh-huh.
To just to sign up for this because it wasn't cheap. Um,
Yeah.
but it just seemed like something that was really up my alley. And once I actually got into the process and started learning more about UX design, I just looked at it and I'm like, I've been doing this for years. Like I didn't even know that this is what it was called.
Like finally, there's a word for it.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
exactly. What I was doing at my old place was fixing up their paperwork and their databases and all that kind of stuff. Like that was experience design. That was,
Mm.
I was going back and I was making things easier to deal with. I was optimizing task flows, and I was just doing it in like not an app. I was just doing it in an operational capacity.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was just like it blew my mind, and I got really into the process. And it turned out a lot of the experience that I brought as being a project manager, working with people and helping do employee development and mentorship and those kinds of things.
Hmm.
It just dovetailed really well with what we were doing, working in these small teams on tight deadlines and having to like keep everything like motivated in the same direction and going. And yeah, and so pretty much since then it's the rest has been history. And it's a field that I love. And I'm still just looking for somebody to trick somebody into letting me do it for them,
Or
basically.
yeah, and having a chance to like prove to everyone else that you know what you're doing and that you're capable because you have this background already that does parallels in some that does have parallels in
Yeah,
areas, definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah, and
And
I want to add to the audience or whatever is yeah. I'm not too sure how the general person's view is on boot camps because I understand that there's many. For example, like in DePaul or so, there are university programs that are similar to UX. I think they fall under the words like human interaction or
yeah,
things like
human
that.
computer interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's for those who might not know what boot camps are. They still are. They're not. I don't agree with the characterization of them being just simply people going in on a whim or anything like that. They are big risks, and they are, as they should be framed, and hopefully they're framed more as big career changes for a lot of people, as both of us can to attest to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, having gone to community college and then went on to, later on a great book school. It was super tiny, but still, it was an
Mhm.
actual college, 4-year college. Like I've been, able to compare the different types of schooling. And, I went to Loyola for a semester and absolutely hated it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I
it
was
wasn't,
thinking about going there. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't because it was a bad school. It was just because traditional education, like the students didn't care. Like, at the undergraduate level, nobody cares. So I wanted to go and learn with people who like really gave a damn about, what they were learning and the subject matter. And that's the cool thing about, boot camps is, on the one hand, like you get people that are like genuinely interested in what they're learning, and they want to make a change in their life.
Mhm.
And also the other thing that's really interesting is you just get people from all sorts of backgrounds. I mean, I came from a
Right.
strip club, I mean, you
Yeah, and I
studied,
came from teaching
yeah,
English abroad. It's so it's a lot. Definitely, I can attest to how varied the people I've worked with while at designation.
yeah,
Yeah, just like their backgrounds, and I've learned so much, like vicariously through them. Simply just like simply asking these people about their lives before designation.
yeah,
And yeah, no, I definitely agree in terms of I definitely understand how for boot camps it's more of an end focused program, I suppose. Like people go there to get this degree and to make something of it typically. And I could understand the feeling that a lot of people go to college without knowledge of what they want to do next, or even I guess even starting out college with the pressure of not like like a understanding what they want to do with that 4-year degree down the line or so.
yeah.
It's I would definitely agree for boot camps the concentration of people going there with a purpose is more so than traditional universities.
Well, and that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is like, one of the main things that we learned in the boot camp is just what agile design was, like just the whole idea of agile.
Hmm.
And the one takeaway about traditional education is that it is the definition of not agile. It is the definition of waterfall.
Yeah.
Which some of the people, one of our cohort, one of the people in the earlier cohort than us, Chad, I guess he wrote an article about this. And it's just, boot camps mirror agile development. It's very, very short, very tightly focused.
Hmm.
The feedback is constant, and they can make changes really quickly. You can make changes quickly as far as what you're doing and the projects that you're working on.
Yeah.
And by the time you're out the other side, like it's a very short time frame.
Yeah.
Whereas with
Mhm.
college, when you enter college, you have to do 4 years because they space it out for you. And
Mhm.
from the time that you enter college to the time that you graduate from college, your job that you trained for could be gone. It could be radically different. They could be the people that are teaching it could be, completely divested from, developments in the field. You
Yeah.
don't know, like, because
There,
it's
there
just,
could be it's definitely with that waterfall approach, the tools you might need when you leave college could be vastly under updated, from what's actually going on in the
yeah.
in the industry.
And I
It's
mean, it's not to say that boot camps are great, because, even the boot camp that we went through, like, there were changes that they needed to make.
exactly, yeah.
There was feedback that we were giving them about ways things could be better, and whether they incorporated that feedback or not, we'll never know. But at the
Right,
same
yeah.
time, as from a strategic model standpoint, you can make these quicker changes. You can incorporate, more data and visualization. You can incorporate, other things as you need them.
Yeah, and the time each class is there essentially, because even though we're calling them cohorts, but like I refer to it as kind of like a class that since they're there for a short period amount of time, even though it's more concentrated of what we did during that time, yeah, that gives boot camp's a chance to, after every class in a way, to update in many ways. And maybe it might be bigger or smaller. Hopefully for some things, Flatiron changed that were bigger, others are smaller or so. We'll see down the line. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely, there is a pro and con to each different type of education. And I'm not even posing that there's a dichotomy between the two for some things, but their nature is different, I would say. And that's
Yeah.
basically what I've noticed when I went to the boot camp from someone who also did 4 years at a traditional university and doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of administrative baggage and all sorts of like being at a college. The social activity of being at a college, I feel like, is unparalleled. We as adults don't really get the kind of opportunity to be able to mix with people that are different than you and come from
Yeah.
different backgrounds and are studying different things. Once we leave that environment, we're kind of on our own. And what ends up happening is we just stay in our own bubble, whether it's a social media bubble or a industry silo of, not really interacting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, these areas of education are really great ways for people to be able to like experience these different perspectives and different, backgrounds and everything. So,
Yeah, it's very untraditional in a way because if we were to if growing up like because growing up it was always framed to me that college was the last natural step, and I noticed that in for college that was the last time in my life at least where there'd be the greatest concentration of people in the similar age, similar situation as well. And since you're all in the same boat in that way,
yeah.
kind of like in the same place, it's different, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's only certain places that you get that kind of mix of people from these different backgrounds and everything. It's like the military is another place that you get
Yeah.
this mix of people that are they're sharing one purpose, but they're coming from a bunch of different things. Like churches, religious institutions, those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things. But there's not a whole lot of situations where you can make this connection with people that are just like you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a really valuable thing, especially considering how homogenized the tech industry is. This is a great way to sort of like bring in more diversity and bring in more people that wouldn't necessarily, not even necessarily like gender diversity or racial diversity, but just diversity of background and viewpoint.
Yeah, I think that's very needed in such an industry, as you'd say, like in a way, kind of homogenous. That there have been trends of the faces and the backgrounds of people in tech now, but adding that's why I really like how UX is becoming a growing field, is because it's asking to incorporate that third opinion or that other opinion that might not be talked about in a bigger company, like in the stakeholders room or things like that, that could actually have a direct impact on how people view whatever product or project you put forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just that's one of those things. It's just like always going to the research and always looking for that feedback loop, because it's like you never know whose viewpoint you're missing. If you were in a room and everybody looks and sounds the same, everybody has the same background, then you're going to come up with a product that everybody else that looks in that is in that room is going to come up with a similar product.
Yeah, because it does give it a potential of having people with the same lens viewing the same or similar lens, at least, because
Yeah.
everyone's unique, but
Yeah,
yeah, in
and
the same way.
that's one of my philosophies as a generalist and sort of the jack of all trades Swiss Army knife UX designer.
Mm-hmm.
I philosophically, I just have problems with this hyper specialization, for that reason, but also just in the sense of, when you have people that have this like super specialized industry, there ends up being this like a class division of people that know what to do and people that don't. And the people who know what to do are able to hold other people hostage if it's something that like you need to do. And I just fundamentally appreciate people that avoid that and make sure that like you want to loop people in. You don't want to have this isolation of like, oh,
Hmm.
we'll let the design team take care of that. Like, you don't have to worry yourself. Like, no, come
Yeah.
in. Like, take a look at what we're designing. Let's like get your feedback.
Yeah,
Not
it's the
not to say that,
collaborativeness of design, which is another thing I really like about design as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
not necessarily to say that we'll take your feedback, but like we'll hear it and we'll interpret it, and we'll be able to know, what, because your feedback may or may not be helpful, but the fact that you're giving it to us and the fact that you're like we're understanding it is super important,
Yeah.
because it might be something that is vital. It might be something that we realize that we're going down a completely different road, and we just need to like radically rethink what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think it's always valuable to have feedback that you're able to internalize, and regardless of actually if you apply that feedback concretely in a certain way, as long as you have it kind of like hanging out in the back of your mind or so, or always on the table as something to use as a tool maybe down the road. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's kind of like the system of design that I've noticed is it's this like agile design especially is just like making these tight feedback loops, so that
Hmm.
like as you're developing your MVP or your whatever, you're constantly checking back in, you're constantly refining it to
Hmm.
make it adapt as it goes on to be the strongest, most efficient, most market viable product that you can create.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's all about that goal in the end,
Yeah,
or it's an important goal for sure.
yeah,
As
because I
long as
mean,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, if you don't keep on tapping into that, whether it's users, employees, the market, whatever, if you don't keep on tapping into that, then yeah, your product is DOA. Like it's going to get to market and just flop.
Mm. Yeah,
So
because most likely that would happen if the product that was being pushed uh, didn't think about all the pitfalls or the shortcomings that could have been provided through the feedback. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. So Alex, I know you said a little bit about about this a little bit, but can you say a little bit more about uh, where you want to go with your UX design?
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, like I said, I definitely want to end up in, UX strategy, product strategy, those sorts of things. Because for me, again, it's this perfect melding of, my systems thinking and sort of meta processing, being able to like, understand and think in many layers at the same time,
Hmm.
with my project management background and instincts, and just being able to like get things done. But just seeing how uh, products and services, I always talk about these as ecosystems. It's
Hmm.
You have this system set up, and much in the same way as like a forest or an ocean, you have these different things that are interacting in the same system, but the way that they're interacting might not necessarily be obvious, and being able to like kind of make sure that everything is going in the same direction towards the same goal, and being able to like notice and make changes to different aspects of the product to make the whole more powerful.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just being able to look down at things from like 50,000 feet, and see the whole ecosystem playing out, and then zoom in and be able to like make subtle changes to one thing or another thing in
Yeah.
order to make the whole process stronger.
Yeah, no, it sounds like that you're really interested in kind of that dynamic between jumping out and in from big picture to small picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like really that sounds what I'm getting at. That sounds what from what I'm understanding, I mean, from
Yeah,
that.
and there's certain things about it too that I've kind of certain things about experience design that I'm gravitating towards more and more the
Hmm.
farther I get out of boot camp. The one thing that is kind of interesting and surprising, but the one thing that's super interesting to me is onboarding. And because working for Shy Commons, we had a problem with working Shy Hack Night, which is it's a civic design volunteer event where you
Like a
get like,
meetup, I would say.
yeah,
Yeah,
meetup. It's
yeah.
like a hackathon where you get like 3 hours to work on a project,
Mhm.
but Shy Commons would spend like an hour and 45 minutes onboarding you into like what they do, what's going on, what, old business they're
Yeah,
handling. And for people that are coming in and jumping in to try and help and,
yeah,
help them towards their goal, they can't really do anything. Like they don't have any projects for them. They don't really, so what I wanted to do is just economize that process.
yeah,
And whether it's for Shy Commons or for other things, being able to really distill that information down and make it easily accessible to a complete newbie, but also easily accessible to people that have gone through and need refreshers on X, Y, or Z.
mhm.
So it's being able to take that information and make it palatable and potentially entertaining is just really interesting to me. And it provides a unique challenge because you have to balance that progressive disclosure with the information architecture in such a way that it's, not overwhelming.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid that cognitive overload in a
Yeah,
way. And it's like, yeah, as long as it answers like the who, what, this is what we provide, this is what we're doing. Uh, that's all. It all definitely, in the terms of Shy City Comments, does. Yeah, we can definitely. What am I trying to say here? So I'm going to actually step back here. So because initially, right now, to understand all those questions I just posed, you'd have to sit in that meeting for the whole 3 hours,
for like
and
an hour.
sometimes might not even be approached because everyone else in that group has been there for a long time. So yeah, it's really important to ask for any project really to think about think about when you bring more resources, i.e. people to it, there should be a method applied to those people.
Yeah.
And that's really important to
Yeah,
think
and for onboarding, like effective onboarding saves you a lot of time because the longer somebody has to be onboarded into a new organization, the longer it's going to take them to be effective.
about.
And potentially based on the effectiveness of the onboarding itself, they may or may, that might be an even longer period of adjustment as they're getting used to how things actually work. And that's assuming that your onboarding is current. Most people, that's one of the last areas of documentation that people worry about because they're worried about, the product or the design or like their job, not about the
Yeah.
new people coming in.
Yeah.
And the people that end up writing the onboarding, most of those aren't experienced designers. Most of those people are, HR or, some other management, and they don't understand these principles. So they just like, here's a bunch of stuff that you need to know.
Yeah, yeah. I could definitely see the pitfall being that they'd apply their already held knowledge of how to even to do that. Uh,
Yeah.
and also where UX approaches for that might not be considered. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really interesting. The more, like I said, again, like I consider myself an experienced designer. And the more that I look out at the world, the more I realize that like you can use experience design everywhere. You can
Mhm.
use experience design, like I said, with onboarding. You can use experience design and like event management. Where you're setting up, people coming into a place like, okay, well, here they're going to walk through here. How many people are we going to have? Like, is the space big enough? Is this, and that kind of thinking is applicable to anything.
Yeah.
It's
No.
a matter of shining the light.
Yeah. Definitely. I definitely agree with that for sure.
So, yeah.
Mm. Cool.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, so
Oh, really? Wow.
I figure, just to go to check back in with the audiences, we just thought we'd try this and see, what we could do about starting some kind of, potentially regular interview with
Hmm.
other, specifically like newer designers that are just getting into it and, talking about their background or maybe going into, other topics in, experience design or, research that they might find
Yeah.
interesting.
Or
And
even like we could talk about it during the like through research, we could even find things that are like adjacent fields to UX or so. That'd be interesting to talk about because off screen, I know you and I, Alex, have talked about uh, AR and VR, those type of aspects, and kind of it'd be interesting to talk about and just start a conversation about what's needed for those, or just simply to showcase more about those industries.
Yeah, absolutely. And voice too. Voice is another thing that I think about a lot
Hmm.
is,
Oh, I definitely agree.
especially because, lacking that visual interface is something that is a huge constraint, and just being able to like figure out how to effectively design a non-visual interface
Yeah.
is a huge challenge that I would just love to dig into one of these days.
It sounds really, as someone who, yeah, who has like a language background, linguistic stuff, that's all ringing, that's all very fascinating to me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anybody who's seeing this and has watched all the way to the end, thank you, first of all,
Yeah.
for going
Appreciate it.
along this journey with us.
An hour is a long time, so I understand, and that's like a long time to ask someone to sit down and listen to this. So
Yeah.
if
So
we're in
thank
the
you.
background while you're doing something else on your computer, we appreciate you giving your time.
Yeah. But if you have any suggestions for topics, or if there's anything that you want us to cover, any particular type of people that you'd like us to have, like on the show, podcast, whatever this is, but the thing, anybody that you want us to have on the thing that you'd be
Right here.
interested in hearing about, just let us know. I'll make some sort of link in the comments, or some way for you to communicate with us, and just basically let us know what you think. So
Yeah.
thanks again for spending time with us.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
See ya. Woo.